So Kamal, is the broadcast on now? Do you know?
Yes, sir. So it is on now, sir. So it is live now.
Sorry?
Yeah.
We are live now?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If you could, Sanjeev, send the link to Sanjeev also.
I'm just sending it, sir. I'm sending it right now. Yes, sir.
So we have 2 more minutes to go, participants. I can see 18 participants on Zoom already. 19. So lots of people very eager to listen to you, Yashodeep.
Wonderful.
So there is some noise in the background. Is it Kamal, you, or is it Yashodeep? Yeah, I think it's a little from your end, Yashodeep. That's okay. I think we'll live with it.
Ramayana.
So we'll start in half a minute. So good morning, friends. My name is Atul Khosla, and I will be the host for you today. I'm delighted to welcome my very dear friend Yashodeep Deodhar, also called Yasho, in this beautiful Nehru jacket that he's wearing, from Bangalore, for the 4th episode of the Yogananda webinar series, sponsored by Shoolini University. We are delighted to have Yashodeep today, and he's going to talk about the very fascinating topic of the Ramayana. All of us have these questions. Is Ramayana relevant for today's world? Is it a fact or a fiction? Who were the Vanaras? Who were the Rakshasas? Were they real? All these fascinating questions, I think, have been in our minds for a very, very long period of time. So Yashodeep, as a quick introduction, started his career with a firm called McKinsey & Company in consulting. He's an alumnus of IIT Bombay and IIM Ahmedabad. And somewhere along the line, he got fascinated by spirituality, fascinated by the Ramayana. So he started reading the Valmiki Ramayana and then started creating content to distribute to the world so that we could understand the Valmiki Ramayana in a better way. He's going to talk to us today about the relevance of the Valmiki Ramayana in the 21st century. So before I actually get Yashodeep on the webinar, I'm going to play a short video, which you'll see in a second. Yashodeep, if you can't hear the video, just tell me with a thumbs up or a thumbs down whether you can hear it or not, and that's true for the participants too. So over to this very fascinating 45 minutes about Valmiki Ramayana with Yashodeep.
Ramayana, the story of Ram, the story that we know so well and yet know so little. We celebrate Dasra to mark Ram's victory over Ravan and Diwali on the day of his return to Ayodhya. And we may remember some of the stories from the Ramayana TV serial, YouTube videos and comics. But who was Ram? Was he a person or God or both? Or was he neither and is all of Ramayana just fiction? Was Hanuman a monkey? Was Ravan really all that bad? And how did Ravan with his 10 heads enter a room? Did he make a sideways entry? And why, oh why, did Ram ask Sita to leave? Was a bridge really built to cross the sea to get to Lanka? And what about the Pushpak Viman? Answers to all these questions and much more is to be found in the Valmiki Ramayan, the story that Valmiki wrote soon after Ram's return from Lanka, and which was later retold by Kalidas, Tulsidas, Kamb, and many others over the millennia. The story that has inspired millions over the ages in our land. I urge you to read the Valmiki Ramayan with me. In fact, I implore you. But why do that, you will ask? Yes, it's not easy. This is a book that has 500 chapters and 24,000 verses. And it is in Sanskrit. Besides, some of you may say, I'm not that religious in the conventional sense. But the Valmiki Ramayan is not a religious book in the conventional sense. There are no religious do's and don'ts in the book. As Valmiki explicitly states, it is the life story of a brave, just man who became a role model in his own lifetime. It is a historical book. Valmiki himself says that this is Ramasya Charitam, Ram's biography, Ramasya Vrittam, Ram's story. And to make things crystal clear, he also says that what he is writing is Itihas. Iti, ha, asa. That is how it happened. It is not surprising that some remain skeptical about this, given that this story has often been described, just like the Mahabharata, as mythology. Now don't take my word when I say that the Valmiki Ramayan is a historical text. But likewise, don't take anyone else's word for the opposite as well. Make up your own mind, but please only after reading the book, or in this case, listening. Disclaimer. Many of us have a deep emotional connection with Ram, Sita, and Hanuman. We may have our preferred version of the Ramayan. This reading is based on the Valmiki Ramayan published by the Gorakhpur Gita Press. So let us dust off this Adi Kavya, the oldest epic, and read it in its original form. 24,000 verses is a lot to cover. Thankfully, Valmiki gives us an executive summary at the beginning, which we will see in the next episode. Remember also Valmiki's instruction, Punyaya mitrebhyah preshayet janah. This means that you should forward this video to all your friends and groups on Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and all social media. Just kidding. Of course, Valmiki did not say that last line, but do forward nevertheless. Iti ha asa. That is how it happened. Valmiki Ramayan, Season 1, Episode 2, Executive Summary. In the previous episode,
Wow, that was so fascinating, Yashodeep. So
Thank you, Atul.
Valmiki clearly says it's itihasa, but I'm confused. Some people say it's real, some people say it's fiction. What's your viewpoint on that, Yashodeep? And tell us the relevance of the Ramayana in today's world. Really, really want to hear this.
Sure. Thanks very much, Atul. Thanks for having me on this webinar today. Delighted to be speaking to your students and everyone else who's logged in today. Like you saw, Valmiki says that this is Itihas. But the question remains that is it fact or fiction? And some people even think, oh, it could be something in the middle. Perhaps there was some element of truth to it. And like the video said, make up your own mind. But in order to do that, I'd like to lay some more points for you to consider as you think through this question of fact versus fiction. The first point is this, the very second shlok in the Valmiki Ramayan, and second out of 24,000, is this. Kon vasmin sampratam loke gunavan kascha viryavan dharmadnyascha kritadnyascha satyavakyo dridhavrata. Valmiki is asking, Kon vasmin sampratam loke, who in the world lives today that has the following qualities? And then he lists out those qualities. So he wanted to know, he wanted to write about a real person, he's very clear about that, and a contemporary person, somebody who lived at the same time as him. And then he goes on to write the Ramayana. So Valmiki has called it Itihas, and he has in fact even used the word Naram for Ram. He's writing about a person, a real person, who lived at the same time as him. Now that is what we have always considered or believed through tradition as well. But I was always curious to know that although we have believed this through tradition, if there was somebody who was neutral and who had looked at it with fresh eyes, what would they think? What did they think? And so I looked at the first Ramayana that was published in Europe, the first Valmiki Ramayan that was published in Europe. And in fact, I will read out some excerpts from that text for you. So this is a book that I have with me, which is just the preface and notes to the Valmiki Ramayan. And it says here right at the beginning that the original edition of the Sanskrit text of the Ramayana was printed and published in Paris during 1843 to 1867 under the editorship of Professor Gaspar Gorisio. And that was the first printed edition of the Ramayana in Europe. Professor Gorisio occupied the first chair for Sanskrit in Italy at the University of Turin. And after quite a long discussion, there is one paragraph that I want to read for you, which is his conclusion on this matter of fact versus fiction. He says, in conclusion, I maintain that we must believe that Valmiki was the first poet of the Ramayana and had been accepted by the tradition of many centuries as the original creator of the epic. That there is no sufficient reason to reject the evidence of tradition, indeed the evidence of the very epic itself, which considers Valmiki to be a contemporary of Ram, or just about. That, in spite of some variations the poem was forced to undergo during its long rhapsodic course, it did not change substantially, and by and large, it maintained its original characteristics. So that was the assessment of the Europeans when they first came across the Valmiki Ramayana. And the other point I'd like to lay in front of you is, if I ask you any book, if I show you a book and say, is this fact or fiction? You would say, well, first let me read it, and then I can tell you. We look for the style of writing. There is a specific style of writing for a war movie, for a thriller, a different style of writing for history texts, and a different style of writing for, let's say, comedy. Now, I want to read out a paragraph, a few shlokas from the Ramayana for you to give you a sense of the style. Now, of course, Valmiki's style is very different at different points in time. But this particular situation is as follows. If you are roughly familiar with the story of Ramayana, Vishwamitra came to the court of Dashrath and asked that a young Ram and Lakshman be sent with him to fight the Rakshasas. And so Ram and Lakshman are going with Vishwamitra, and during their journey, this conversation takes place. They come across a city called Vishala, and they are outside this city, and Ram asks, what is this city? And Vishwamitra replies as follows. I'll read out for you. So he says that this city was established by a king called Vishal. And then he says, Vishalasya suto Ram Hemachandro Mahabala. Vishal's son was Hemachandra, the mighty. Suchandra iti vikyato Hemachandrad Anantarah. After Hemachandra came Suchandra. So he's giving a list of these kings. Suchandra Tanayo Rama Dhumrashva iti Vishrutah. Afterwards came Dhumrashva, Dhumrashva Tanayash Chapi, Srunjayah Samapadyata. And then Srunjay. He keeps going on. After Srunjay came Sahadev, then Kushashva, then Somadatta, then Kakutstha, and then Sumati. So Sumati is at number 10, starting from Vishal, the founder of the city. And then he says, now we are going to step inside and meet Sumati. And then they go inside the city. The reason I read this out for you is it basically reads like a bullet point list. It's a list of names. Why would Valmiki, who's a brilliant poet, put a list of names if he just wanted to write poetry? And he does fantastic, he creates fantastic verses. Why would he put a bullet point list? If this was just a thriller, a war story, why bore readers with a list? And this is not just the only one. There are lists of all kinds. At one point, he gives a list of names of Astras and Shastras. 2 entire sargas, in fact. Out of the total 500 chapters, at one point, there are 2 chapters with just names, one after the other, of Astras and Shastras. There are names of rivers, cities, lineages, who's for that king, who was the mother, father, sister, lots of names and lists. Clearly, Valmiki was trying to record things. That is the only reason he would put a list of such kinds, lists of such kinds into his narrative. So these are all the points that I'd like you to consider. Unfortunately, the discussion on fact versus fiction keeps going on. But I'm very sure many people have reached conclusions without reading the original text or a direct translation of it. And I urge you, like the video said, make up your own mind, but only after finding out what Valmiki has said. And that brings me to the second question that you had asked, Atul. What is the relevance of Ramayana? Why bother? Why find out whether it is fact or fiction? Why read such a big text? And here, I'd like to take you to one place near Mumbai called Ellora. It's near Aurangabad. Now there, the main temple was built. It's a rock-cut temple. So the main temple was built out of a single piece of mountain, single piece of rock. And it's a huge temple. And the whole complex took 600 years to make, because instead of putting brick by brick and creating a structure, they chipped off parts of the rock, parts of the mountain, and what was left was the temple. So 600 years it took to make this temple complex. And in the main temple, right in the middle, there are 2 sides. And 2 stories are painted on these 2 sides. And if I ask you which 2 stories could they be, most people will reply, Ramayana and Mahabharata. And indeed, that's right. These are the 2 stories, Ramayana and Mahabharata. I asked the students of Shoolini and others as well. Our ancestors were inspired by this story to such an extent. And Ellora is not the only instance. Throughout this land, between the mountains and the seas, you get examples. Our ancestors were so inspired by this story that for 600 years, they were chipping away at rock to paint the pictures of this story. Shouldn't we at least find out what it is all about before we reach some judgment about it, before we decide whether we like it or not, before we come to some conclusion that it's relevant or not? And finally, about relevance, one thing I'd like to say is, why did Valmiki write this? Why did he write the Ramayana? He wrote it because he wanted to set the highest example of good behavior. In fact, perfect behavior, perfect human behavior. And you would agree that today, bad behavior in society is certainly a problem that we are facing with. And that was essentially called, bad behavior was called Rakshasi Pravrutti. Rakshasi Pravrutti was prevalent then, and it is prevalent now. And in order to overcome that, we need to have an ideal of what is right behavior. And that is the ideal that Valmiki has put in front of us. If you follow any sports, you may have some particular sportsman as your ideal. It's always the real person that is your ideal and not some fictional superhero. We have ideals for sports, but who's the ideal for perfect behavior? That is the relevance of Valmiki Ramayan. Now, whenever we look at behavior, we need to understand. Now, many people have questions about whether Ram did, was it right or not? These are important questions because we are talking of perfect behavior. If we don't agree that the behavior was right, how can that be an ideal for us? But before we look at the decisions, we need to understand what is the context in which these decisions were made. And that is where in the Ramayana, the first book, the Balakand, Valmiki sets out the context. He describes what life was like in the city of Ayodhya, what life was like for the Rakshasas and the Vanaras. There are many misconceptions about who these people were, who are the Rakshasas, who are the Vanaras. And with these misconceptions, we won't be able to understand why Ram made the decisions that he did. And so it's important. As an example, now let's take up one episode. We will watch episode 7 next of this series. By the way, this series is on the YouTube channel 21 Notes. So far, Ayodhya Kand and Balakand have been covered. We will watch episode 7 on the Vanaras. Go ahead.
This is Valmiki Ramayan, Season 1, Episode 7, Vanaras. Who were the Vanaras? Were they monkeys? Or were they primitive tribes? Or were they a different race altogether? The answer is most emphatically none of the above. Valmiki has spelt out in no uncertain terms that the Vanaras were Vanacharinaha, people who roamed in the forests. And they were not a different race. Their genetic roots were the same as that of the city dwellers. Also, not only were they physically very strong, but they were extremely intelligent too. The Vanaras wore a tail and a headdress like a monkey, just as some tribal communities wear horns on their head. But there is no doubt that they were humans. Even in our times, fat cats in white shirts and black suits may look like penguins, but they are not penguins, nor are they cats. They are CEOs, investment bankers, and management consultants. And not all the forest-dwelling folks wore tails. Some resembled bears. Essentially, Vanamrati iti Vanara. The one who lives off the forest is a Vanar. Over time, the meaning became more limited, and the word Vanar started being used to denote monkeys only. Further, Valmiki says, Rukshishu cha tatha jata Vanarah kinnarishu cha. Some of the Vanaras were born to forest dwellers who dressed up like bears, and to Gandharvas. If Ruksha referred to bears and not to people who wore a bearskin, and Vanaras referred to monkeys and not to people who donned a face mask and a tail, then the above sentence by Valmiki would mean that monkeys were born to bears, which is obviously not what he meant. These forest communities were not a different race compared to the city dwellers, for Valmiki has said, distinguished rishis, siddhas, vidyadharas, uragas, charanas begot heroic sons who became forest dwellers. Note, some of the Vanaras were born to rishis, just like some of the Rakshasas, including Ravan, as well as some of the citizens of Ayodhya and other cities. The notion that forest communities were primitive people that were racially different from city-based people is absolutely false. Vanaras were physically very powerful, and they were also very intelligent. The intelligence part unfortunately got glossed over in some of the later retellings. But Valmiki is clear. The Vanaras were Nayadnyan Buddhi Sampannan Vishnutulya Parakraman, knowers of statecraft, endowed with intellect, and equal to Vishnu in prowess. Further, they were spread across forests and mountains throughout the world. Once again, the notion that the Vanaras were only in South India is completely incorrect. Yam Prithvi Saparvatavanarnava Kirnataihi. This earth, with its mountains, forests, and seas, was pervaded by them. And Bhuv Samavrita Babhuva. The earth became covered by them. Extremely unfortunately, Vanaras are almost always characterized as monkeys in popular culture. Look at most contemporary comics, cartoons, or pictures on Ramayana. But look further back in history, and there is no confusion. For example, in the sculptures depicting Ramayana scenes at Ellora and Angkor Wat, Hanuman and the Vanaras are shown in a form, size, and proportion very similar to Ram and Lakshman. The only difference is that they are wearing a mask and a tail. After that background of the Vanaras in general, Valmiki now introduces the leaders among the Vanaras who will play a crucial role in the story later on. Vali, Sugriv, Tara, Nal, Neel, and Hanuman. Hanuman, born in Kishkinda in present-day Karnataka, and in popularity unmatched throughout India. The Hanuman Chalisa in Hindi, the Maruti Stotra in Marathi, and similar prayers in all languages. He is on everyone's lips in times that call for brave action or even otherwise. Now, what made this Vana reach such exalted stature? We will have to wait many seasons to find that answer. With that short diversion out of Ayodhya to understand the background of the Rakshasas and the Vanaras, we will now head back into the city in the next episode. Life in the city is as good as it gets. But there is danger lurking not too far. Terrorist cells are beginning to pop up way too close to ignore. Iti, her, asa. That is how it happened.
Thank you. So we saw in this video that the meaning of the word Vanar, the way the word Vanar was used by Valmiki, was different from how we use it today. And actually that's true for another very important word, dharma. I said in the first video that this is not a religious book in the conventional sense. But we keep reading the word dharma in the Valmiki Ramayan. And it's possible for somebody to get confused because dharma is today many times used in a limited sense of referring to religion. But the way Valmiki has used that, and you can understand that by looking at the context. So if you replace the word dharma by some other phrase when you're trying to translate it, let's say, into English, the phrase that fits best instead of dharma is righteous behavior. What is the right thing to do? And that is the meaning in which Valmiki has used this word. But over time, the meaning of the word has changed, at least in popular usage. Vanar was one set of people which over time became a bit misunderstood as to who they were. The other set is the Rakshasas. Very clearly in the Valmiki Ramayan, Rakshasas were not a different race. They were not only in Sri Lanka or South India. There was nothing geographic or racial about this. In fact, the first Rakshas that we come across in the Ramayan is Tataka. In Sanskrit called Tataka, in Hindi Tadaka. She's a woman. And by the way, she was born in a very wealthy and a Yaksha family. She became a Rakshasi. And that we see again and again. People become one because of their behavior. In fact, she became full of Rakshasness. The words used are Rakshasatvam Bhajasveti. She became full of Rakshasness. It's a tendency. It's a behavioral quality. it's not a different race. Essentially, the Rakshasas believed that might is right. If you can get away with it, then take it. If you can take somebody's wealth and get away with it, take it. There is no question of what is the right thing to do, what is dharma. Ravan also thought, if you can take somebody's wealth, take it. If you can take somebody's wife, take it. So once again, not a racial or geographical description of Rakshasas. The other question that sometimes comes up is, we do find, I narrated for you a few shlokas which read like a bullet point. There are other instances which read in a very fantasy type way. They don't seem believable. And then we say, what do we do with this? Is the whole story therefore not true? But the definition of itihas is Purva Vrittam Kathayuktam Itihasam Prachakshate. Purva Vrittam, that which has happened in the past, and Kathayuktam, that which is told in story format, is known as itihas. Let's understand this a little bit better in the next episode, which is episode 13 of the first season, and it's about the birth of Ganga, Bhagirath's story.
This is Valmiki Ramayan, Season 1, Episode 13, Ganga. As they headed north from Siddhashram to Mithila, Vishwamitra told his fellow travelers, Ram, Lakshman and the Rishis, the history of the lands they passed through. When they came upon the banks of Ganga once again, Vishwamitra started narrating the story of Vriddhim Janma Cha Gangaya, Ganga's creation or birth and her development. Now we are traveling back many years even before Ram's time. Therefore, Valmiki may not have been the first to document these events. And Ganga's story is found in some other texts as well. But as a chronicler of the history of Ram's time and the period before that, Valmiki has included this story in the Ramayana. We saw in episode 6 that itihas is Purva Vrittam Katha Yuktam, that which has happened in the past, told its story format. So as we read the story of Ganga, let us also sift through the narration to understand which is the Purva Vrittam part, fact, and which is the Katha Yuktam part, embellishment. In ancient times, there was a great king of Ayodhya called Sagar. In his time, there was a severe water crisis. Thousands of people died. The only possible solution was to bring water down from the icy tops of Himalayas into the dry plains below, to bring down the Ganga. Told in story format, Sagar's 60,000 sons had been cursed and burned to ashes and needed Ganga's water for their redemption. Sagar, his grandson Anshuman, and great-grandson Dilip all tried hard but were unsuccessful. The land had been reeling from the water crisis for 4 generations. Katham Gangavataranam Chinta Paro Bhavat. Now it was up to Dilip's son Bhagirath. When he became the king, Bhagirath entrusted the kingdom to his ministers and devoted himself to the task of bringing down the waters of Ganga. The challenge was not only to get the water down from great heights, but to do it safely, without causing any environmental disturbance. Gangayah patanam prithvi na sahishyati. The earth will not be able to bear the descent of Ganga's water. Ganga starts her journey at Gangotri, which is at a height of 3,400 meters or more than 11,000 feet. she reaches the plains at Haridwar, which is at only about 300 meters or 1000 feet. The straight line distance between Haridwar and Gangotri is 138 kilometers or 86 miles. Over such a short distance, imagine water is falling down a height of 3 kilometers or 10,000 feet. Bhagirath worked extremely hard for many years, or in other words, did tapasya, and was finally able to get the water down safely. Bhagirath brought down the water in smaller streams so that the flow could be better controlled and then connected them. In story format, it is told that the force of Ganga's flow was throttled by Shiva, into whose matted hair the river fell. A scene beautifully depicted by Raja Ravi Verma in his famous painting on Ganga. But making the connections was also a huge challenge, for Ganga was lost in the maze of Shiva's hair and could not find a way out for many years. Eventually, Bhagirath was successful, digging flow paths, making bunds and embankments, or in more poetic words, Bhagirath on his chariot led the way and Ganga followed. Yato Bhagiratho Raja, Tato Ganga Yashaswini. Wherever King Bhagirath went, Ganga followed. But there was a major problem just as the project seemed completed. Ganga's waters disappeared, perhaps split into streams and percolated into the ground. Mahatma Janhu suggested a realignment of the flow path, and finally the river came down to the plains in the desired way. In story format, the river appeared through Janhu's ears. Bhagirath charted her flow all the way to the sea. And so was completed one of the greatest civil engineering works of all time. And it was done in an environmentally sustainable way. The new river brought health and prosperity to the people. Ganga gave life. And so she is Ganga Ma, the mother. She is Bhagirathi, born through the efforts of Bhagirath. She is also called Jahnavi in memory of Janhu's contribution. By the way, since a new river was born, she must have a birthday, which we celebrate on the Dashami of Jyeshtha. Valmiki says that Ganga's waters started teeming with Matsya Kachchapasangaihi Shimshumar Ganaihi, shoals of fish, turtles and dolphins. The famous Ganga River dolphin that we can see even today. And Ganga's flow was Kwachid Drutataram Yati Kutilam Kwachidayatam Vinatam Kwachidudbhutam Kwachid Yati Shanai Shanaihi. At times rapid, at times slow, at times curving, at times wide, at times suddenly falling down, only to rise up again. Muhururdvapatham gatva papata vasudham punah. Again and again it would rise up, only to come crashing down to the ground. Sounds like a promo for whitewater rafting at Rishikesh. What a fantastic achievement by Bhagirath. To this day, a great effort is also called a Bhagirath Prayas or Gangavatarana. What an inspiring story. There is much more to it, but we need to wrap up now. As Vishwamitra said to Ram on one of the nights of their travel, Kator dharatrah ka kutstha kathah kathayato mama. I have been telling stories, and it's past midnight now. O Ram, let us all catch some sleep so that we do not face difficulties in the journey. Always the wise old men telling the ever-enthusiastic youngsters to go to bed. Iti her asa. That
Wow, Yashodeep, this is so fascinating. I'm getting goose pimples, and I so wish we had more time with us. But a few questions, Yashodeep.
Sure.
You've been in the corporate world. You went to IIT, and then you worked in consulting, and then you built a very successful business. From corporate to Ramayana, why? What made you take the journey?
I happened to read the Valmiki Ramayan, and actually the reason I used to think that I know the story of Ramayana. Why read one more book? But my mother gave me a book on Valmiki Ramayan, and the only reason I read it was because she had written it. But when I read that, I was so amazed and I was so intrigued that then I wanted to know what Valmiki has said in his own words. So then I started reading the Valmiki Ramayan in Sanskrit. And what I found was astonishing, and I wanted to share it with everybody. And that's the reason I'm making these videos. I was hugely inspired. I loved it. And it was different from what I had thought I knew about the Ramayana. And that is what I'd like to present in front of everyone now.
This is so fascinating. Before we go into Q&A from all the people who are attending this webinar, and please start asking questions. One thought comes to my mind, and that is we keep on talking about the Ram Setu. We keep on hearing about the fact that Hanuman and his team went and built that. What are your thoughts about the Ram Setu? Is it really a historical fact that they really built it? What's the story behind the Ram Setu?
I'll just lay for you how it is described in the Valmiki Ramayan. That is all I can do. And it is very clearly mentioned that the Setu, in fact, it's a bund, it's not a bridge. So it is a bund made up of tree trunks and sticks, stones, mud. So it was, land was filled up at the point where the sea was very shallow, and a bund was made, which was called the Setu, to go across, to go to Lanka. So that is how it has been described in the Valmiki Ramayan.
So fascinating. One more question before I open up to the public. And that is the whole Agni Pariksha of Sita. So why did Ram do that? What was the, Ram was an ideal. He was also an autocratic king. He didn't have to do all of this. So what made him make Sita go through Agni Pariksha?
Well, that's a long question. And I don't know if we have time for that today. But one thing is, the question you are asking comes right at the end of the Ramayana. So after the war is over. And as we already saw, there are a lot of things, whether it is about the Setu or about Vanaras or Rakshasas or meanings of we thought we had known. And I would urge everyone, in fact, I'm not really sure that the answer can be given so quickly. But if we understand Ram's character, and if we understand the relationship between Ram and Sita, and perhaps we can do that in another discussion like this in a few days, where we look at the character traits of that, you would find again that the answer is very different from what we think we know. Again, I would leave it at that because I would definitely need a whole session perhaps on this question only. Yeah, but I know that is a question in a lot of people's minds, and we should come back to it at some point.
So we're going to do one more session with you for sure, and I think we'll probably do that next Monday, and we'll answer these questions. But I have a few. I think I can take 2 or 3 questions from the audience, and this is a very interesting.
On this chat, I see a couple, and let me just.
You want to take it yourself? Or should I read it to you?
Maybe I've seen a couple, and if I miss something, you can just point me to that.
We've got around 5 to 6 minutes. Yeah, sure. Just to keep timing.
Okay. So there is a question about the top ideal behavioral traits which we can take from the Ramayana in today's world for happiness and success. Very important, very good question, because that is what the Ramayana is all about. It is from learning good behavior. And here I'd like to, there are so many that it's difficult to pull out the top. But if we have to do that, one, of course, would be how to face adversity. And today we are all facing adversity. Some little bit of adversity only, like me perhaps, who has to sit at home, and that is all. And others who are facing a lot of adversity, who have to be outside and who have to be tackling the situation. Now, how do we face adversity? Ram's life turned upside down on the day he was asked to go into exile. He was about to be crowned the Yuvraj of the greatest empire in the world, the successor, from having it all to having nothing at all in one moment. And how did he face up to that? And we all know that he faced that with perfect equanimity, with no anger, no bitterness, no feeling bad for himself. That was the right thing to do at that time. According to his judgment, the right thing to do was to uphold the king's promise, because if the king's promise was broken, dharma would be broken. That was his assessment, and therefore he just followed through on all the implications of that decision. So how to face adversity is one big learning that we can draw from the Ramayana. And the other I would like to bring out, it is perhaps very mentioned repeatedly in the Ramayana, and very easy for us to follow, but rarely followed, or we can definitely do a better job of following that, which is as follows. Ram is described as being very powerful. He was the greatest warrior. He was the prince. However, it is also mentioned that in all his conversations, he used to speak kindly. He used to speak sweetly. He did not use harsh words. Mridupurvam. If there was a debate, if he wanted to convince anybody, he would convince them with arguments and putting forth his arguments rather than force his point of view through his authority. And there are instances in which he gets convinced by others as well. And all these conversations are had in good language and not speaking harshly. And that is something we can readily follow. But we all know what kind of words we use, especially when we are hidden in social media or hidden behind handles, the kind of words or thoughts also that we have. I think this is a learning that we can all have. Speak kindly, do not use harsh words. It doesn't cost anything. So these are the top two for now. Limited time, but definitely a lot of things to learn from the Ramayana about right behavior. Atul, depending on time, you pick the last question.
I think I'll pick up Arvind's question where he's asking, clearly you're saying that Rakshasas are not a different tribe. So he's saying, what about the Rakshasas of today? As educators, and there are many educators on this webinar, what can we do to see less of them?
Well, that is definitely, I'm sure you're already doing that, which is to inculcate good behavior among people, amongst us, amongst our students. And the way to tackle Rakshasi Pravritti, bad behavior, is to set the ideals of good behavior, which is what the Ramayana also does.
So thank you, Yashodeep. What a fascinating journey. Like I said, we'd love to get you back again.
Thank you.
I was just told that today is also the day of Baisakhi. When you and I set up this webinar, I don't think I thought about it that way. It's a coincidence. So what amazing thoughts on the day of Baisakhi. I think I'd like to wish everyone, the panelists and all the audience, a very, very happy Baisakhi. Hopefully the Baisakhi brings in happiness, takes the corona away, and hopefully we can move into better life. Ram Rajya, as they call it. So with that, thank you very much. And I look forward, everyone in the audience and the panelists, including you, Yashodeep, to join us tomorrow. Same time, 11:30 a.m. We have again a very fascinating speaker, a very fascinating topic. Naren Churmule, a very famous biotechnologist, will explain the science of corona to us in layman terms. So if corona intrigues you, if you have so many questions about corona, please join us tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. at the Yogananda Guru Series, sponsored by Shoolini University. Once again, thank you, Yashodeep, and look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you.